Hi YouTube friends. Today we're doing a quick 15-minute tutorial on weaving the houndstooth pattern. Let's get started. You're weaving. I've got a longer tutorial that I will put up there in the corner if you just really want the full meal deal and watch me do everything. But this is for people who've woven before. I have a 32-inch Ashford rigid heddle loom, and I have tied off my warp. I've done 7 passes, you see here, of red on this side and 7 of red on this side with alternating red and yellow in the middle. Okay, so I've got 11 of this yellow and I've got I guess 10 then of the red. Okay, this is how you set it up to do a houndstooth. You use 2 colors to do a houndstooth. It's a lovely tight pattern. These are both Simply Soft, and this color is Sunshine, and this is Autumn Red. I love that color of red. And this is a nice contrast. You really do want a bit of contrast when you do a houndstooth. Now I'm going to tie my warp here closer to the top and also closer to the bottom, and I'm going to snip the ends, and then I'm going to use my tensioning device to roll it up. On my peg at the other end, I put a big fat rubber band on the top, you see there, so that the yarn doesn't pop off the top. And remember, you're going to snip these ends off the end, off of that peg. You're going to cut them, and the purpose of that peg is not to put any tension in your yarn, in your warp, because as you see, as soon as you cut it, all the tension is gone and it droops. So don't cinch your yarn around the peg. If you're wondering, is it important to cut and retie with every color change on this weave? Yes, it is. I've done it the other way where I try to just pass the yarn down and it created a horrible mess. So do be careful and do the cuts. Also, make sure you take time to straighten these little warp yarns before you put the tensioning device in. My tensioning device is going in. I have another video that I'll put up there for you to watch if you want to see everything about this Ashford tensioning device. And I find that I am able to reuse these zip ties as long as I haven't cinched them so tight, and as long as I put them on before I then put the rubber bands on each one of these rollers. Now it's just taken me about 5 minutes to put this tensioning device on. This is a homemade tensioning device made with 4 different dowels of mostly about 1-inch size. I've got ponytail holders here and rubber bands also holding them to this side rail that fits very snugly on each side, made out of yardsticks. And then in order to keep the rollers tight to each other, I've also got these zip ties. This creates the tension among the rollers here, in between them, and keeping them tight together is very important. That may seem time consuming, but I want to show you how easy it is to roll this up. I don't even have to hold this down here. It's just pulling it up over the front stick. I don't have anybody helping me, so I can always roll my yarns of my warps up on my own. I can let go of everything and use both hands to put these cardboard dividers in. It's very nice. It doesn't matter that this is loose and this is tighter because all the tension is created here. And so it evens everything out. I can just roll it up. See the difference between the tension here and the tension here and back here? Occasionally I'll comb through things here if they look like they're going to get tangled or something, but that really doesn't happen because the heddle combs it all before you put it in. And if anybody tells you that an Ashford won't take a tensioning device behind the heddle because there's not enough room. I think you can see there's actually extra room. The reason why I have to bind these rollers together with zip ties is because I have to keep them all together because there's extra room and they would slide forward if I didn't. The important thing to do is to raise those rollers up on the side rails. If you do that, you'll have plenty of space in the back, and that makes the tension device work so much better because the heddle does all that combing work for you. If they were in the front, I would be constantly straightening them. Here, the heddle does that work. Now I'm going to untie a little bottom ponytail tie here. Get them right about the right length. And we're good to go. And I'm done. Wasn't that easy? Now I'll take my whole tensioning device off and I will slay every other yarn through the eyes and I'll be ready to tie it up. All right, I have slayed my yarn. Every other yarn has gone through the eyes. To slay just means to pull it through the eyes like that with my little hook, and I have knotted it and then tied it with twine onto this front warping stick. And then if you want a little bit more tension, you can always crank it down with this gear. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is, and I really like doing this standing up. I have this in a dresser drawer and I'm standing as I do this. It's better on the back. Now I'm going to start putting some scrap thread in here and a couple of spacers to get a nice straight beginning. Here's my scrap yarn here. I had to put a little extra on this end and on this end because my knots weren't absolutely even. And so that evened it up nicely before putting these two spacers. They give an absolutely razor edge to that bottom, which is very nice. Okay, now I'm going to begin my weave. The primary color here is my red. And so I'm going to have a border of red down here. I'm going to leave myself a nice tail. So I'll go ahead and do this. I'm not going to beat too hard, but I do want a solid fabric. I don't really want any open holes in it. Then one of the most careful things you can do when you weave is your edges. Make sure that you pinch your edges. Leave this weft thread going up and just pull gently so that the tendency is for the cloth to go pinch in, and you want to always pinch it back out before you beat every time. Okay, now I've done my base at the bottom, and I just want to show you my preference when I do a houndstooth is to have a square of solid here. So if you want to know how much to do up, just do it until it looks like a square. I think that gives a nice, this is a very tidy, neat, not free-form pattern. So I think that that looks good here. And at this particular weave with this yarn, that's 14 passes, 7 one way, 7 the other. Now I'm going to start on my houndstooth pattern, and I'm putting in my yellow. And you see here, I'm leaving just a little tail of, let me get a little closer to my selvage over here. I'm leaving a little tail of yellow so that when I beat down, it pulls it in away from the edge. Now this little shuttle is kind of small, but I think it works. But the only other one I have is very large, and it's really a pain. So, so now I've got a pass of yellow. Notice how I don't pull it tight. I don't put any pressure on those selvages. Now, the important thing to do with a houndstooth is your alternating colors. You do a across and back in one color, and then you do an across and back in the other. And when you do this one, make sure every single time that your new yarn lying on top of your old yarn before you put it through. This will make everything tidy along those selvages. And I will be alternating these two colors all the way the length until I get to the border on the other end. After I get a bit of this done, I'll show you a close-up of how this looks along the edge. It gives a really, this happens all the time when you have these cardboard strips here. If they're too long, they catch. What ends up happening here is that these two yarns, if you do it consistently in this pattern, they rotate around each other in this beautiful looping pattern that goes up the side of, actually I end up liking this side better than I do the other side because of that kind of gentle, it's like a gentle swirl, which is so nice. After I lay the red shuttle down, I make sure that the yellow one is on top of it so that it's easy to pick it up. And the yarn is right there where you want it. I think it helps to pull this previous yarn out straight. See how that's beginning to swirl there? With these short shuttles, you do have to kind of fiddle with them more often. Make sure and get this red one on top. This is not really hard to do. It's just a little, you have to concentrate on this edge just a little bit. I've made these, I've used the houndstooth pattern in shorts and narrow scarves, and I've done table covers. It's really so good for so many different pieces. It's really a beautiful pattern. Okay, so now that I've gotten a few done, we'll look at that selvage really closely, and we'll look at the pattern. Here is that edge, and see how pretty that is? Now, I want to remind you, this is not tight. I really never pull, I never put any tension from side to side, from selvage to selvage. It's easy to do that when you're beginning. This is the other side. It's also rather pretty. And here's the houndstooth, that lovely kind of complicated cross. And you get that all the way up. And before I get to the other end, I'll make sure that I leave enough room for another panel down here of solid red that gives you the stripe here and the solid on the sides. There's your houndstooth pattern. I hope that that is helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe and like and comment. Thanks. I want to add one more word about tension and my tensioning device. Now, when I'm weaving this, I want you to see that there's spring and bounce in these. There's even spring and bounce. When people don't use a tensioning device and they desperately want more tension on their looms so that when they go through their sheds, their yarn stays straight and they don't get floats, they end up cranking up this back warping stick and this back roller, and they crank it hard and hard until some of these are just rigid. And that's when their strings break, because they're putting their yarn under too much tension, trying to get a good weave, an easier weave. A tensioning device is so nice because it puts even tension, but it doesn't put too much stress on your yarns. And I just think that that's so important. When I pull my warp down, which I just did, and get my line way down here. When I did that, I didn't end up with this, where some of my warp strings are tight and some of them are loose, and so you get this wave. Because I have that tensioning device, I end up with a nice straight line. Sometimes toward the end of the weave, it gets a little teeny bit wavy, but it's very, very correctable. But it's so nice not to have all that variation, the inconsistency in tension. So please consider using a tensioning device. It takes a little bit of time to set one up, but it is so worth it so you're not pulling your hair out on your weave.